In the last live stream, we got an interesting bit of information dropped by Steven. He said they currently have 100,000 Alpha 2 testers signed up. This means they potentially have raised a lot more money for this game than we once thought. So I thought I would take a look at not only what the potential total funding has been for this MMO, but also do a rough estimate of what they might have already spent and could spend in the future to get a complete picture of the financial situation surrounding this MMO. Keep in mind, throughout this is all highly speculative and not a direct representation of the financial situation surrounding this game. So first, we know that there were 13,000 Alpha 1 testers. Each tester spent at least $500 to buy these packs. That means Alpha 1 raised a total of $6.5 million. Alpha 2 is said to have 100,000 players currently signed up, so if you exclude the 13,000 Alpha 1 accounts, that means there are 87,000 accounts that spent at least $250. So Alpha 2 is currently sitting at 21.75 million raised, and will likely to continue to go up as we get closer to the launch. My assumption is beta signups are probably much lower for now, but in the future will go much higher. For now, I'm going to estimate that beta pack sales are about 20,000 at $75 a piece for another 1.5 million raised. Then we have the Kickstarter, which raised 3.2 million. And yes, there is some crossover between the numbers just mentioned, but since I'm leaving out cosmetic only sales because we have no way to estimate how much has been raised there, I will just add this in as is. Then Steven has said he has committed 45 million to this project. And we have 2 PPP loans that total 2.5 million, which most likely were forgiven, as 92% of all PPP loans were forgiven. This brings the grand total funding to 80.5 million for this project at the current time. And again, this is a very, very rough estimate, so do not take this as 100% factual by any means, please. With anticipating further sales of Alpha 2 and Beta once we get closer to those, I estimate they could exceed $100 million raised eventually. This sounds like a massive amount of money, but is it enough money to build an MMO of the size and scope of Ashes of Creation? Well, let's take a look at what some other MMOs have cost historically. First, the average AAA game cost about $80 million to develop. AAA MMO production costs can vary wildly from that average number, however. For example, here is a list of the most expensive AAA MMOs ever produced. Star Citizen, of course, tops the list at $500 million. New World, SWTOR, and ESO cost $200 million. Final Fantasy was around $120 million. Even World of Warcraft, clear back in 2004, cost $63 million at its initial launch. As you guys know, inflation has been pretty aggressive the last few years. $63 million in 2004 is equivalent to nearly $100 million today. But what is one thing all these very expensive projects had in common? Each one of them either had an entirely new game engine for their games, or they heavily modified an existing engine. Intrepid is not doing that. They are relying heavily on Unreal Engine, which has proven to be a very capable engine and will likely drastically cut Intrepid's cost of production. Also, some of those MMOs like SWTOR had extensive voice acting, marketing, and cinematics. Ashes is not going to have a lot of that, so there is a huge cost saving in those areas as well. But what Ashes does have is an absolutely massive scope, which I recently covered in this video. So while it might be saving in some areas, the time to develop this MMO could continue to add up to higher and higher costs over time. So let's look at what I estimate they might have already spent on this game and what the cost going forward could be. So for this, it is important to note that Intrepid Studios started as a very small company. Those that make the claim this game has been in development for 6 years are a bit mistaken, as the first few years they had a very tiny development team. Also, their studio was at one time much smaller than it currently is, which means lower rent costs the first several years. In 2017, they only had 20 employees. We know from the PPP loans that in 2019, the average salary at Intrepid was around $83,000. So adding a bit to that for inflation and using $85,000 as an average means that in base pay, Intrepid would have paid out $1.7 million in salaries alone in that first year. Then you have to add in benefits, which most businesses average paying out about 30% of the employee's salary in benefits. That adds another $510,000. Then payroll taxes and unemployment taxes take an additional $138,000. I don't know the old studio size, but we do know the new size is 17,000 square feet. The old studio was much smaller, so I'm going to estimate it was 5,000 square feet. The average rent per square foot in the Sorrento Valley area of San Diego is $36 per square foot annually. This means that the cost for studio rent that first year was $180,000. Electricity costs roughly $1.44 per square foot annually, so add another $7,200 to the total first year expense. This gets a total of roughly $2.5 million in the first year alone in expenses. And remember, this was with a very small team. Going year by year and accounting for the team growing to the current size of 170 employees and counting, and the larger 17,000 square foot studio, I get a very rough estimate of $73 million in total expenses for this project to this point. Keep in mind this does not include any fees like studio cleaning fees, costs to renovate the studio, furnishing expenses, technology expenses. You could easily add several million to this total with those expenses. If you want to see all the numbers and how I figured them all up, I have a spreadsheet in my Discord if you want to fact check me on this, but again, this is a very, very rough estimate. So with my current estimate of 80 million raised for this project, but 73 million spent, does that mean this project is doomed and about to run out of money? No, I personally have no worries of that, because as hype builds around Alpha 2, and certainly once we get closer to the betas and final launch, more packs will obviously be sold. And as I said, there are some that have spent a ton on just individual cosmetic items as well that I didn't even factor in. So as long as this project continues to make solid progress, I think it will be fine in terms of the financials. But I still think it certainly doesn't have enough money to have any more major delays or setbacks. There is a limit to how far this money can stretch. But I do think if Steven did need to get more funding for this project, it would not be hard to entice a private investor. The negative of that is investors often want some say in how the project is run. So that is not an option I think anyone wants to see. But at the end of the day, if that is what it takes, I could certainly understand it. Or I suspect Steven has plenty of collateral to put up for loans if he needed to. Either way, I think he will find the money if it comes to that. But for now, I suspect they are probably fine. I don't think they are necessarily drowning in cash, but I think they are probably pretty comfortable right now. What do you think about my estimates that I did here? Did I miss something? Let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, subscribe. My Ash's referral code is in the description if you need to sign up for an account. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.